going to be reading out of the book of Esther this morning, out of the fourth chapter. It's kind of a coincidence. I didn't think about this when I scheduled this at the beginning of the summer when we're talking about various relationships, and I was going through all the pairs of people or groups of people that would exhibit something of a part of a relationship that all of us need. And so I thought about Esther and Mordecai, and I didn't realize that I was going to be reading it because Thursday my mom, whose name is Esther, would have been 100 years old. So it's kind of a cool weekend to be reading from the book of Esther. We will read from the fourth chapter, beginning at the first verse. And even though it doesn't say it in the bulletin, I'm going to read through verse 17. I would invite you now to listen for the word of God. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went through the city wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed in a sackcloth. In every province, wherever the king's command and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting. And most of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and her eunuchs came and told her the queen was deeply distressed, she sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth. But he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai and learn what was happening and why. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and charge her to go to the king and make supplications to him and entreat him for her people. Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying, "All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes into the king inside the inner court without being called, that there is but one law. All alike are to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may a person live. I myself have not been called to come into the king for 30 days. When they told Mordecai what Esther had said, Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter, but you and your family will perish. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this." Then Esther made a reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. After that I will go to the king, though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but this, the word of the Lord, will endure forever. Thanks be to God. Amen. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be found acceptable to you, O God. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. There is a program on ABC. It's a weekly program, I think. I haven't seen it for a long time, but I remember it. It's called What Would You Do? It's hosted by John Quinones. And they use actors and actresses, and they set up various situations out into the public area. And they watch people's reactions, and they see what they're going to do to various situations. They might set up they've set up situations where maybe there are a couple of disruly and really difficult children who are causing their mother so much frustration that she walks away and leaves them in the middle of a walkway and says, "You walk home," and leaves them there standing. They watch to see what will the people around them do for those children. They might they've gone into a bar and they've sat people down and they've sent in a couple of actors and a woman, and when the woman leaves her drink at the bar, they see that the two men put some drugs into the drink as a dating drug. And they watch to see, will somebody say something, because everybody at the bar saw it happen. The question is, what would you do? And they go through situation and situation and time again, and I think the whole purpose of the meaning of the program is to get us to think about, well, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? Do we stand up and do the right thing? Esther is in one of these moments where she has to ask herself, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? But before we get to her reaching that point, it would help if you knew a little bit about the background if you haven't read Esther for a long time. There are really basically four main characters in the stories. There's King Ahasuerus, or Xerxes. We'll just call him the king. It's easier to say. Now, this king of Persia, he reigned in the second half of the 6th century BC. He had a vast kingdom that ran from Egypt to India, some 179 provinces or countries under his rule. He was at a point in his career where he decided no longer to try to expand his kingdom, but rather he had now sitting back, kind of enjoying the fruits of his labor. As a result, he made a man named Haman as kind of the official ruler, or official for the whole empire. He turned the daily decision-making process over to Haman, and Haman would make sure that everything was done, and the king would maybe sign the decrees and put his signature on things, but all the work was done. And the king, he just wanted to enjoy his time in his palace and his wealth and his riches and his glory. Now, Haman is another type of character. He was one of those ambitious types who will do whatever it takes to get ahead. He will crawl over people's back because he likes power, he likes influence, he likes wealth. He likes to be looked up to. Even if people don't like him, he doesn't care as long as he is the one of influence. He would invite people to his home to show off the nice things that he had recently put into his home or added to his home. He would sit around dinner table. He would tell them about the people he met, the things he had done, the things he had accomplished, how he hung around the king all day long. He was important, and he wanted people to know it. In fact, he liked it so much, he got the king to sign an edict that anyone who was to approach Haman would need to bow before him, as they would bow before a king. You might say he had an ego on him. But there was one person who would never bow to Haman, and that was Mordecai. Mordecai was a Jew. It was a time of the exile. A good portion of the Jews had been exiled out of Israel, spread throughout the empire. He was the one in Susa, and he was defiant. And it really aggravated Haman. You can imagine somebody who expects you to bow down, and every time you saw this guy, he would never bow before you like everybody else, which was hard on somebody with an ego like Haman. And every time Haman saw Mordecai, because Mordecai seemed to hang around the king's gate a lot, he got madder and madder and madder. Furious and more furious and more furious. He hated Mordecai. The other character, of course, is Esther. Esther is the adopted daughter of Mordecai. Mordecai was actually her uncle, but when her parents died, Mordecai adopted her as a daughter, raised her, brought her with her wherever Mordecai was. Esther was with her. He was her father taking care of her. But she was a beautiful woman and a charming person. And she happened to be the one chosen by the king when they did a nationwide search for a queen. They brought in all the beautiful women of all of the empires and all the provinces, and they were brought to the king, and the king tried them out for a day, and if he liked them, they stayed. If he didn't like them, they went. But Esther was special, and the king chose her to be queen. And she lived in the palace. And that's why Mordecai was always out in front of the king's gate. Now, the one thing that nobody knew was that Mordecai and Esther were Jews, because they had kept that secret during this time of this national search for a queen. As far as anybody knew, they were just regular people. Nobody ever asked. They never bothered to tell. And so we get to the plot. Now, Haman was, as I said earlier, was angry at Mordecai because Mordecai would never bow to him. And some of the servants asked Mordecai, why didn't you never bow to Haman like everybody else? And he told them because he was a Jew. The Jews don't bow to anybody but God. Haman and Mordecai was not about to bow to anybody but God. Word got back to Haman that he was a Jew. Now, Haman restrained himself from doing anything to Mordecai because he really didn't think him at his level of significance should really be dealing with just one person. So he came up with a better idea. Rather than having to deal with just one person, let's deal with all of the Jews. And he convinced the king to send out an edict that on the 13th day in the month of Adar, every Jew in all of the empire shall be killed. In one day, the Jewish population would be wiped out in the empire, the Assyrian Empire of the day. That's why when we began our text, Mordecai is at the gates, sitting in ashcloth and ashes, dust, weeping and mourning. Because the time is ticking, the clock is running. The 13th of the month of Adar is coming. And on that day, every Jew will be killed. So what does Mordecai do? He goes to Esther. Now, Esther has no idea what's going on. She hears about Mordecai sitting at the front gate with a sackcloth and ashes and mourning and weeping. And what does Esther do? Well, here, take some clothes and give them to Mordecai so he doesn't have to wear those sackcloths anymore. Without having an idea. Well, because what would the queen know? The queen lived in her palace. They took care of her. When the king wanted her, he sent a message and told her to come. And other than that, she lived in her palace separated, taken care of. She wasn't part of the daily world. She lived not in the real world, but in the palace world. She had no idea what was going on until Mordecai, through these messengers, told her that in a certain amount of time, on a certain day, all the Jews would be killed. And Mordecai puts a challenge to her, would you please go talk to the king and see if you can convince the king not to do this to our people. Esther's response is, well, Mordecai, I'd like to help. I really would, but there's a law that says anybody who goes to the king without being invited, and if he doesn't raise that scepter to acknowledge you, you die. If I go to, and I haven't been called to the king in 30 days, and I have not yet received a call, I have no reason to go into the king courts because the king doesn't want me. And if I show up, he doesn't like it, I die. You understand her hesitancy. Then we get to Mordecai's famous quote. Mordecai first lays out the facts. He says, Esther, if you think that your royal dignity, your royal position, your queenship, or whatever you want to call it, is going to save you when the Jews are killed, don't count on it. Remember what happened to the previous queen whom you replaced. So just because you're queen, don't think that you're going to be spared. And besides, if you don't speak up now, there will be a redemption that will rise from some place, from some quarter. And if you don't speak up and it rises from another place, then you and your family will not be spared. And you will and your family not be spared. And then the famous line from Esther is, oh, by the way, maybe it is at this time, for such a time as this, you've been placed into this position to save your people. Maybe you are the queen because God has put you there so that you might redeem and save his people. Queen Esther thinks about it, sends a message back, tells Mordecai, okay, have all of the people fast for 3 days with me. We will fast in my court. We will fast. We will all fast, hoping God will let us know what it is to do, but I will go to the king, and if I die, I die. It's funny what Mordecai says, if you don't speak, there will be somebody who will rise up for redemption. The biggest threat to all of this, that the queen will be silent. And as I was thinking about that, you kind of wonder if a Protestant theologian from Germany, Niemöller, wrote a famous kind of quote. He was at the time of the Nazis, and he was reflecting about the Holocaust. And they said, when they took the Jews, I was not a Jew, so I didn't move. When they took the Catholics, I wasn't a Catholic, so I didn't react. When they took the workers, I wasn't a worker, so I didn't stand. When they took the Protestant clergy, I was moved, I reacted, and I stood up. But the only problem was there was nobody left to speak for. Esther is at one of these crucial moments where she has to answer the question, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? We all need a Mordecai in our lives. We need a Mordecai in our lives, someone who will come to us and remind us of our call by God. We need a Mordecai in our life who will come to us and remind us of who we are, who will remind us what our gifts are, what our purposes are. We'll need a Mordecai who will come to us and remind us what is important and what is not important. We need a Mordecai in our lives who will come to us and hold us accountable for what God has given us or where God has placed us. We need a Mordecai to call us out. We need a Mordecai to pray with us, to fast with us, to be with us when we face hard challenges. We need someone like Mordecai to walk with us in those moments where we have to make the hard decision to do what's right, even if it costs us. We need a Mordecai to be in our lives, to remind us of what God has for us to do. In one of the shows, what would you do? They placed actors in an upscale clothing store in Soho. And they had an actress who was African American walk in, dressed in a winter coat, jeans, nothing out of the ordinary. The store was full with other shoppers. And when she walked in, the sales staff immediately started to look at her with suspicion, and even one of the sales staff, who was an actress, came up to her and stopped her and asked her what she needed. She said, "I just came here to shop," and the actress would say something like, "Well, our clothes probably don't fit within your budget. You probably can't afford what we have." And she said, "No, I'd like to look around." And as she looked around, they'd follow her around and say, "No, you can't afford that. Why don't you go back to where you came from? Maybe go back to Harlem and shop in your own town." They even got to the point where I asked, "Would you please not be here? Would you leave?" But before she left, they called security and frisked her and searched her, even though the sales staff had been there with her all the time, watching every move. They treated her as if she wasn't going to be there. They told her that 90% of their thefts were done by African Americans, and the store people watched. Some of them, even though they all heard what was going on and saw what was going on, some of them kept their nose in the clothes rack and never looked up. Others looked down but would look up, waiting to see if something was going to happen. Maybe somebody would stand up and do something, say something. And it was only after a long time, one of the ladies stood up, and finally, as they were standing next to her, and the sales clerk was questioning this black woman about whether she really should be in here, whether she'd take anything, whether she could afford anything. She finally looked at the clerk and looked at the woman and said, "If I were you, I'd file a complaint, because you do not deserve to be treated like this." The clerk started to defend herself. And every time she tried to defend herself, the woman would say, "I don't care, she doesn't deserve to be treated. That's all crazy, and it's not." She said, "File a complaint, put these people on notice. You can't be treated like this." And eventually, the woman looked at the African American woman and says, "Give me your arm," and they went, "Your arm, come on, let's go to a different store and let's shop together." She grabbed the woman's arm. They walked out arm in arm to leave the store. As they got to the front door, you look behind them, and everybody else in the store is walking out with them. You see, sometimes we need a Mordecai to challenge us, to call us out, to hold us accountable, to make decisions, to stand up for people who can't maybe stand up for themselves. To make those hard decisions that maybe sometimes will be difficult, but we stand up for justice. We stand up for those who are voiceless. We stand up for those who maybe don't have the opportunities we have. And that's because that's what Jesus did, didn't he? The woman at the well, the woman who kneeled down before him and washed his feet with her tears, scored. He touched the lepers. He gave vision to the blind. He healed the lame. He went to the people who were the outcasts of society. And it aggravated those who were in charge. But he made a clear message. These are my people. He rose from a corner to a different part to rise up to save and redeem the world. Just as Mordecai was sure that God would redeem the Jews from this edict of annihilation. If Esther didn't do it, God had perfect faith that Mordecai had faith that God was going to do it from some other way. He didn't know where. But you see, Esther wasn't Mordecai's last chance. He saw Esther as God's first choice. The question is, who's your Mordecai? Who walks alongside you, holds you accountable, reminds you of who you are and whose you are, who challenges you to stand up at those moments where it would be easy to walk away. The other question is then, whose Mordecai are you? Who do you hold up and pray and fast with and stand with, challenge? Whose Mordecai are you? Because really it comes down to if not you, then who? Not today.